we have our final spectacularly, brilliantly outstanding author. From Denmark, we have Dorthe Nors. I'm sorry you're last. Don't misunderstand this. It's basically...
It's a privilege to have fellow writers like that read to you.
Oh, well, aren't
Thank
they
you.
fantastic?
Yes, they are.
And I think it's always great that you can all hear one another as well. And I know that some of you have been reading each other's books anyway in preparation for tonight.
Yeah,
We'll test you later.
Good books.
They are good books. But you can hear, how great, and what a great choice we made, I think, I would say. Now, this, again, was just, there was no question about this. This was just a fantastic book. This is my copy here, which is got a bit of rain on it today. This is called Karate Chop, but if you turn it around that way, it's called Minna Needs Rehearsal Space. They are both by Dorthe Nors. They are both published by Pushkin Press, the amazing Pushkin Press. And one of them, though, is translated by Misha Högstra,
yes.
and the other is translated by Martin Aitken. First of all, congratulations on these. These are short stories, and I know that you are known particularly for being a novelist in Denmark.
Yeah.
And then you went and wrote short stories.
I don't think I was known for anything much in Denmark before I wrote these short stories, which is interesting because I wrote 3 novels and they just got thinner and thinner and thinner. Unlike myself, they just shrunk. And then a fellow writer of mine said, I think you would be good at writing short stories, Dorthe. And I said, no way am I ever going to do that. It's like it's a difficult genre. I will not master it. And I said, well, there's something in the way that you speak that, tells me that you should do that. So I wrote one story and then another one, and I didn't know what I was doing, actually. It was just fun. It was like I've been, practicing the violin for years and years and years, and suddenly I found out that it was the ukulele that I was good at. I just wrote this book in a burst, and it was published in Denmark, critical acclaim. I bowed. Nothing else happened. But then I took it to America. They love short stories. They sort of got it. So over 6 years, I translated one story in collaboration with Martin Aitken on that book. Translated one story after the other. It was great fun. Never had a story rejected in America. Moved up, got scouted, had the book out at the Grey Wolf Press in
Grey Wolf,
States.
yes.
Grey Wolf Press, a great independent press. And it just exploded. And to make a long story short, which is my deal.
Have you said
I
that
ended
before?
up in Pushkin and in Great Britain.
Well, you're
all
very
over
lucky
the
to be
place.
with Pushkin Press, I must say. And they make such wonderful covers.
Yes,
as well,
isn't it
too.
beautiful?
It is rather lovely. You've discovered that you're good at short stories. Does that mean you've sort of given up novels now?
No. I recently published in Denmark a novel, which is also going to be out on Pushkin in next year. And that's a real novel. So I think I went into... I wrote 3 books that were rather compressed and short and very minimalistic. And it was like I was distilling my voice and figuring out what to do. And actually making it so blunt and small to see how low can I go? And then take whatever I learned from that genre and from that kind of writing and take it back to the novel. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stay in the novel and stick to that.
Was it difficult, though, to go so short? this is... Hello?
Somebody has to come up.
Was it, you went for... because if you look at Minna, Minna Needs Some Rehearsal, and sort of show you how it looks on the page, because you can see these are very, very short sentences, single words sometimes. It looks a bit like a shopping list. But in fact, it's really pared down to this poetry. So do you find it difficult now to write long sentences, or your sentence is quite short still?
No, I'm like Jaap. I was thinking I like short sentences. I like the clarity. Also, the Danish language calls for that. We don't have as many words as English, for instance. I think the rumor has it that we have 250,000 words, and the English language has the double. even though we taught you how to speak English. We did.
Okay.
I mean, but somewhere along the line you elaborate.
Over a glass of wine later. Okay.
No, but there is something in the short form that goes well with the Danish spirit, I would also say, sort of a deadpan, sort of a straight way of talking, but also with the fact that every word has like 3 or 4 meanings in Danish. But the reason why Minna Needs Rehearsal Space, which is this side of the book, turned out the way it did is that it's written only in headlines, all the way through. And it's basically because I was thinking that is how we write on the digital media. This is how we communicate. The way we communicate on our iPhones and on the internet is changing the way we use language, which means it changes the way we narrate. And as a writer, I have to sort of deal with that. Also, I thought it was very fun dealing with it. In the beginning, in the early days of Facebook, the status updates would always read, for instance, if it was me, Dorthe goes to the bathroom, Dorthe makes herself a cup of coffee, and it would always be me in the beginning of the sentence. So I started writing a story. How deep a story can you actually write using that structure? And at one point, both the sofa, the coffee cups, Brahms, everyone becomes the subject of these sentences. It was a game I didn't even know if I was going to send it to my publisher. It was like a game I had with myself.
It must be a wonderful discovery, though, to, as you say, to discover you can play the ukulele. But
yes.
Can you?
I want to play the organ.
No. That'll be the 700-page novel, I should think.
Yes.
Now, as far as what you actually write about, the content of what you write about, it is sometimes quite violent, quite cruel. You know, there's a lot about relationships. I mean, there's a huge mix of subjects that you write about. But can you see there's any one particular thing that you're writing about, or? You said you wrote these in the space of a few weeks, and it just came out.
Well, that's.
You didn't write.
It's a myth that occurred in the Paris Review, I think, that I wrote all these stories in 2 weeks. I wrote 7 of them in 2 weeks, which is pretty crazy in itself, but it's not all of them. I would say that all my literature, both my novels and in everything that I have written ever, I am very fascinated by people on thresholds, people in situations where they have to choose something new or where they don't know how to choose something new, or they're on the brink of losing themselves, or, you know, in life-altering situations. And this is also why this one, and this is about translation, that was actually a hard one to translate, because the Danish title is Kenslet, which means 4 things in Danish. It's a rim shot when you play the drum, and it is also a chip of porcelain, and it is short for karate chop. And it is also the 2 words, the battle of Kent and Slay, which means the battle that takes place on the threshold or on the edge. So we went with this one because it looks nice on a front page.
Well, it's a really good
but also
title
because
for your kinds of
Exactly.
quite incisive, sharp
it
stories.
says something about the form and also about the violence that is in many of these stories, or the violence that perhaps had been taking place before the characters start telling about their life.
But then you've got a story like The Buddhist, which was the story that we all read for the judging, which is an absolutely remarkable story in the sense that it tells you often describe people who are actually quite innocent. They don't know themselves particularly well. And like Annalisa, for instance, the innocent wife who's with her husband sort of looking at porn, and she has no idea what she's really, and she blames herself for everything in their marriage. And then you've got the Buddhist, who's in fact a businessman who wants to do some good in life.
He's a diplomat.
He's a diplomat.
He's basically... no.
He's like Alec Popov.
Yes, exactly. No.
But he's a diplomat who became something else.
Yeah.
Who became a Buddhist in order to help society.
Yeah.
But he chooses a particular. I mean, you turn the tables on everybody.
I like to look at weird people. I like to look at people who are not that funky and who are awkward and strange, and also evil. There are also some sort of borderline psychopaths luring in the corners of this. But I think the writer, I like to look at them with empathy. And also I think that the short story is a form that is very suitable for these glimpses into the human mind. These, like, I always say that a short story, the kind of stories I write is like it's completely foggy. It's a mist, and then out of this mist comes a face and a voice and a character, and they're there for just a brief moment, and then they just disappear into the mist again. And this allows us to actually interact with pretty freaky people. But if you have them for like 400 pages, also as a writer, to actually living with a freak for like 3 or 4 years while you're writing it, the short story is a good place to investigate these sort of structures.
Have you ever had problems by living with a character? Have you ever sort of felt traumatized by living with a character?
I had my third novel, not my short stories, that's hit and run, no. But I wrote a novel called Anne Lee, which I really love. I'm very happy about the novel, but it's about sorrow and about a 19-year-old who's lost her mother. It took me 3 years to write. The format was difficult, but every morning I had to go to the computer and dwell on sorrow. And after that book, I said, I'm not going to write anything that is not sort of creatively joyful. It might be murderous or strange, but I have to feel like this is fun working with. And that's sort of been my principle ever since.
Dorthe, will you read for us? Which one are you going to do? The yellow side or the blue side?
I'm going to read from the yellow side. I'm going to read the beginning of the story, The Big Tomato. And I'm probably going to say The Big Tomato or The Big Tomato and mess it all up.
Do you live in the States then now?
No, but this story is written based on some interviews I did in New York back in 2006.
So you do live in...
I have stayed there. I live in Denmark, but I've stayed in New York for several occasions.
We could go on, but yes. I think everybody wants to hear your...
Ooh, I'm stepping on myself here.
I was doing exactly the same.
Yeah.
So thank you. So Dorthe Nors is going to read from Karate Chop, from The Big Tomato.
I'm going to read the beginning of The Big Tomato. I want to say that the narrator is a Mexican au pair in a Danish, very funky couple's penthouse. She's a maid there, and she's the narrator. The Danish couple is called Bang, Mr. and Mrs. Bang, but when you're in America, that turns into Bangs. The Bangs work a lot and never shop for groceries themselves. Everything in the refrigerator is ordered online. Every Sunday evening they place their order. Every Monday a box is left outside the door with all their food. One of these Mondays the box contains a tomato weighing more than 4 pounds, which the Bangs do not believe they ordered. The first thing is that they cannot possibly eat a tomato that big. The other thing is that they're paying by the ounce. It's too expensive, says Mrs. Bang, so Mr. Bang calls the online grocery store to complain. At 7 that evening, while I am busy in the guest bathroom, the doorbell rings. As usual, Mr. and Mrs. Bang are not at home, and it's up to me to see who it is. A small man is standing there sweating and says he has come to collect the tomato. I fetch it from the refrigerator and give it to him. He remains standing on the mat, so I ask him if there is anything else. He says he doesn't get paid for his work other than what he makes in tips from the customers. I explain to him that the Bangs are not at home. He says he picks up his deliveries on a bike that has no brakes. He shows me the soles of his shoes and wipes his forehead. Mr. and Mrs. Bang are very nice people. Mrs. Bang works for the Danish consulate on 2nd Avenue, organizing trade delegations from her home country. Mr. Bang, or Lars, as he likes to be called, is a record producer. I got this job cleaning their penthouse in Lower Manhattan because I do the cleaning in his record studio. Mrs. Bang is very tall and beautiful and has blonde hair. Mr. Bang is even taller, and if he is home when I arrive, he gives me a high five with his hand down low. The nameplate on the door says, The Great Danes. This is a joke some friends of theirs I like the banks, but when the banks aren't at home, I'm always afraid that they will suddenly appear in the doorway. That's why I hesitate to invite the man inside, but he is sweating and the banks have air conditioning. I tell him my name is Raquel and that he must take off his shoes. His name is Gabriel. He says he has other returns he needs to pick up elsewhere in the city. I tell him I will give him something for his trouble. He says he won't accept anything if it is my own money. We smile, and he puts the tomato down carefully on the kitchen counter. And you got to read the rest yourself. He ends up stealing the maid from the family. Thank you.